Dave, welcome back to our channel. This is Miriam.
This is Harrison.
And we are this Double Field Safe Free.
Yes, we are.
Jesus, unbreakable, Wolverine, Alamantia. Walk with the light in the night, the from the Green Lantern.
Please like, comment, and subscribe.
Today's video is a bit of a serious video. It's been long awaited. It's been a little over 4 months since we had a little bundle of joy. 4+ months postpartum. I don't know if that applies to daddy, but mommy has been going through postpartum.
Whatever you go through, I'll go through too, babe.
Okay.
Men do go through postpartum as well.
Okay, yes they do,
As a
but
reaction
very, very, very different from what women go through.
We suffer emotional distress from...
Alright, we will pray on whether or not we want to release the birth vlog footage. But we are going to sit here and share our birth story. You guys will get to finally see baby Josiah at the end of the video if you haven't already seen him on our Instagram pages. No, it might get emotional for me. I've not really sat down and thought about this in months. I've chosen not to dwell on my birth, our birth, my birth.
Our birth.
My birth. It was, I consider it traumatic in its own sense. And so this is just my experience as a Black person and as a woman in receiving healthcare in the healthcare field in America during a pandemic. Let's get right to it. I was in labor for
3 days.
3 days, 2 or 3 days. I labored at home for 2 for sure. I started what I think was mild labor. Started feeling mild contractions on Friday, which happened to be the day I went in for my last prenatal visit. I went for my prenatal visit on the morning of Friday. They checked how far along I was. She wanted to scrape me because she believed I had dilated 4 centimeters and she believed that the baby was going to come that day or the next day, but sometime soon. I refused for her to scrape my water. Scraping the water, it will encourage your water to break or something like that. I refused, but she did check my dilation. I was 4 centimeters dilated. And then after that visit is when I started feeling some contractions. I don't know if it was my mind encouraging my body to get into labor, since this doctor had told me that I was going to have this baby anytime soon. A disclaimer, I suppose, I have very little tolerance for pain.
Yes, she does.
I felt like I was having some labor pains. I was having contractions. I started timing them and they were getting to become more consistent on Friday. Saturday comes along. I tell my husband that they're definitely getting more consistent. At this point, we've already prepared for the hospital. Our bags are packed.
Yes.
And we had already delivered our son, our oldest son, to his godgrandmother to be cared for while we were away. The pain started intensifying for me. I literally would have to stop. And then we decided to go shopping, grocery shopping. We were debating that.
It's basically through those times that you really realize how much you can really endure. And I'm sure you didn't feel that you can take that much pain.
Yeah.
But in this case, you had no choice.
I didn't. I guess
when you're faced with no choice, that's when you really have to push it through.
Yeah. Well, apparently my pain wasn't painful enough, but we'll get to that in a minute. We decided that we would go shopping, grocery shopping. My husband had thought that we shouldn't, but I was like, I think I need to walk so I can progress the labor so that I can go to the hospital, because I knew from watching the millions of videos, labor videos I've watched. We watched a lot.
Oh my goodness, every day.
We watched a lot of labor and delivery videos. So I knew that I didn't want to go to the hospital too early. Roll it back. We do have to mention our birth plan, right? Because that would then make everything else make sense.
Let's just rewind it a little bit and comment a little bit on watching the videos. Watching the videos can be a good and a bad. For one, you definitely become more informed,
more educated.
And on the other side of things, everybody's story is not just going to be the same. And some people can definitely get some form of fear built up from watching so many videos. So you have to watch the video with an open mind, open heart, and just know that your story is going to be different, and wherever God's going to allow to happen, He's going to allow for your good.
Watching the videos for us, we felt like would educate, at least for me, it would educate me and give me realistic expectations. And the reality is that, you know, you might be in denial, but the reality is that Black women in healthcare, there's a high mortality rate for Black women delivering babies in hospitals in America. So being that I knew this, I wanted to be as equipped mentally and emotionally as possible by watching other Black women. And I watched all kinds.
Yeah.
I didn't just watch Black women's labor and delivery videos, but I wanted to have a realistic expectation of what things are going to look like. This wasn't obviously my first time giving birth. I have our son Jaden, and that is another story on its own. This is a great segue into our birth plan. Because I had my first son cesarean, if you didn't know, I had him cesarean, and again, that was not by my choice, and
Circumstances.
it was apparently circumstances. I want to dwell on that a little bit because that inspired the reason for our birth plan, my birth plan. So I had my son Jaden. That was traumatic also in its own sense, but we're not here for that video. And because of that, I was determined that I didn't want to have a C-section, so I was shooting for having a vaginal birth after C-section, which is called a VBAC in short. I'd done my research, found the doctors that, you know, supported that in this area. Mind you, I delayed finding prenatal care up until like my 20th or 21st week, and I don't regret that because, you know, there isn't much you miss in those early weeks. Things you need more monitoring, I think, as you get more advanced into the pregnancy. But part of the reason why I delayed is because I wanted to do thorough research before I committed to a doctor. Because of my birth plan, I wanted someone who was going to respect the fact that I wanted a VBAC, because a lot of people would just shut you down when they know that you've had a C-section and they just say it's automatic repeat. But if I did my research, I can leave information down in the description box if you're considering a VBAC for resources to educate yourself on. But it is 80%, there's an 80% success rate for first VBACs. So I wanted to do that. Initially, I wanted to do it.
Initially, she wanted to do home birth.
Yeah.
However, she fell in the high risk category. So just to be safe,
because of the VBAC. Because I've had a C-section. So
yeah. So I just definitely vouched for her to get it done in the hospital. Yeah.
So
with a midwife, and at least a VBAC was a little bit. We get a little bit of both. You know, we get the security and the emergency room response, and at the same time we get to do it naturally.
The birth plan was to have an all-natural VBAC. Some people might think this is laughable because I say that very little tolerance for pain, but I was believing that the Lord was going to give me supernatural power and supernatural strength to get through the pain. In any case, when I wrote down my birth plan in my notebook, I wrote there a prayer that submitted that birth plan to the Lord and say, Lord, these are my plans, but ultimately you are God, you are Jehovah, you are sovereign, and your will, at the end of the day, may your will be done. This is my desire, but at the end of the day, your will be done over mine. That's literally, I wrote that prayer right next to my birth plan in the notebook. So that was the birth plan. I wanted to have a VBAC, wanted to have it as natural as possible. And so I took my time trying to find the people who would support that and not brush me off. Because actually the facility I went to for a gynecologist, appointment where I ended up finding out I was pregnant, they automatically said you're having a repeat C-section, and I didn't want to hear that. So it meant that I wanted to do my research, so it took me some time. Didn't get a provider until I was like 21 weeks along. I contracted for Friday and Saturday. I wanted to delay as much as possible so that I wouldn't be sent back home.
We were advised if by the next day. We went to the hospital a day prior.
Yeah,
based on the contractions.
I haven't gotten there yet. I was talking about like contracting at home. I was in communication with family, and so after consistent contractions that were painful to the point where I would stop in the store and breathe through it, I was encouraged by family to go ahead and go to the hospital. So we ended up going Saturday.
Because of the contractions were lying too close to each other. They were about like 5 minutes apart, 2 minutes apart, and they were very intense.
Yeah,
and usually that's a sign. That's a sign that the baby's on its way.
It's 511 or 411. So contractions every 4 minutes, lasting a minute, and consistent for an hour. Yeah, my contractions were doing that. I think they were consistent with this. That's why we went to the hospital.
They're consistent, for the most part, I would say.
We went to the hospital on Saturday, and then I got seen in triage. They wanted to determine whether or not they would keep me, and at that point I was 5 centimeters dilated. So I explained to them that earlier. Actually, it was Friday. The same day I was seen by my gynecologist is when I went to the hospital. So Friday night I went to the hospital, and I told them that that very morning I'd already been seen by a gynecologist for my prenatal visit, and she checked and told me I was 4 centimeters dilated and that I would have the baby anytime. So then the midwife checked me and said I was 5 centimeters dilated, but I was not yet, I was 50% effaced. This midwife who was unfavorable to me, in my opinion, was very dismissive of me, because even after we got admitted, it just wasn't a great experience. Anyway, this same midwife checked me, told me that I was 5 centimeters dilated, that they recommended that I go back home and come back when the pain is excruciating and tears are literally falling out of my eyes. Because I wanted a VBAC, it was almost like to that person, to that midwife, that they thought it was ridiculous that I wanted a VBAC. They just wanted me to have a repeat cesarean. So they were like, almost like persecuting me for my choice to have a VBAC. So it was like, go back because you want a VBAC and you don't want us to intervene. You need to go back, because if you stay here, we're going to intervene. So we don't want you in here too long. So go back and suffer back home and then come back. That's how I sensed was the approach. At that time, I dismissed it. I didn't want to think on it too much because I had just gotten in contact with this person. So anyway, we come back home, and then I labor at home. I was in pain. To me, it was a lot of pain. Obviously not as painful as labor would be later on when the labor progressed. But I labored in my bathtub. And what was...
You put some warm water.
Yeah.
And
warm water with
essential oils.
No soap, nothing.
And we had quiet music playing around with nice
worship
incense
music.
around. Yeah, we had a whole playlist of worship music that we put together. Intermittently, you're bouncing the ball here and there.
I was in the...
But for the most part, you're in the bathroom.
In the beginning, I was in the bathtub, so I was laboring in there. It did help me to be in warm water.
Yeah, it was quite intense.
We're gonna be real and honest in this, because I think people need to understand that marriage isn't always rosy and like butterflies, but there's actually misunderstandings, there's rough patches and things like that. And the honest truth is, during my labor, when we were sent back home, you were exhausted, you said, and he fell asleep, and I was in pain. He was exhausted. He had been preparing for this baby. I wasn't doing anything. He was getting the house together and everything, took time off work, so he was pretty exhausted. But because he fell asleep while I was laboring. I was pretty upset, like I'm in pain, I can't even fall asleep and you're falling asleep. I was pretty upset at him. So I transferred myself from the hot tub, well, warm tub, and went on the bowl. This is at night. I'm like in pain at this point. I let Saturday go through. I labor at home. Jeez, babe. Tired again.
Again? I've been tired, Chris.
I started laboring and walking around, like jogging around our community, and he's very encouraging about it. He was very encouraging about it.
She was ready to get the baby out. There's some point in time that she was so over it.
I was over it. I was in pain. I also went up and down the stairs in the house. Saturday went by. My family kept checking in on me. Sunday, I felt like the pain was like really intense. Now
I was doing some exercise that were recommended to help induce the labor.
Yeah, I tried to do everything except that water, the midwife's concoction thing. I didn't want to do that, but I tried to do everything in terms of exercises.
Went up the stairs, went down the stairs, we're doing dips.
At the end of the day on Saturday, I told him that if we don't go tonight, I'm definitely going Sunday morning. So we ended up going Sunday evening. Actually, I let the day go by and we went Sunday evening back to the hospital. At this time, the new midwife, because they rotated every 12 hours or so, and the new midwife checked me, said I was still at 5 centimeters, but I think I was almost completely effaced. And they were like, well, it's up to you, you can go home. But when I checked for dilation, I also checked the bag, and there's a lot of pressure, which is a sign that your water might break anytime soon. And I said, well, if my water is gonna break and that's a reason for me to rush back to the hospital, might as well just stay here. If it's gonna break soon, then I might as well just stay and be admitted.
That seemed like a good idea.
We got admitted, and they encouraged me that since I wasn't progressed enough, that I should walk out a lot. Now, mind you, this is a pandemic season. First of all, no one besides my husband was allowed to come, whether to visit or anything, and he was not allowed to leave me or the building. Once he left, he would not be allowed to come back, and I had to get a test in order to get admitted. He didn't have to get one, I had to get one. I was actually very anxious about that test. I had anxiety over it, but ended up getting it, and really it just felt like the same discomfort you feel when water goes up your nose when you're swimming underwater. So we got that out of the way, started exercising, bouncing on the bowl, walking around, dancing to worship music, doing everything I could. I barely slept throughout the night, trying my best to progress this labor. And then to my horror, the next morning, the next midwife comes and checks me in. Well, the same midwife, before she leaves her shift, she checks me and says, well, I've not progressed. I was absolutely upset. And I was like, what do you mean I didn't even sleep? I might as well have slept. Like, I wasted
after the rupture
time.
of the water.
That was before. So because she told me that I hadn't progressed much, that she recommended that she break my water, because she stated that will encourage progression of labor. But at this point, I'm over it. I'm like, even though it was against our birth plan to have it artificially ruptured, we wanted it to the water to naturally break. I was like, okay, let's just do this, because I really am over it and I'm in pain. She broke the water, and obviously once the water is broken, your chances of infection of you and the baby increase the minute the water breaks. At this point, I'm believing that this is going to progress labor and it's going to move things much faster. So they positioned me in an upright position, allowed that water to really drain out, and the baby's head can be encouraged to come further down, because he was still in the negative station. I get the little peanut ball to put between my legs. I think a new midwife comes in at this point. Later on, towards the late afternoon, checks me, says that I had completely effaced. I wasn't all the way dilated, and that the baby was still at -2 or was it -1 station wise. Baby, it in a favorable station. Then they were like, well, we're going to recommend that we put you on Pitocin. That's when I'm just like, okay, this birth plan is going out the window at this point.
Because at that point in time was running down.
Yeah.
Time was running out. Her water was broke.
My water was broken.
And it can hide.
It was increasing chances of infection as the time went by. And it had already been hours. So I was like, fine, whatever, we'll have the Pitocin. I didn't know that the Pitocin, or at least the nurse who was there, was going to be upping the dose so much each time. Because the thing, I believe that Pitocin, it's the imitation of the natural hormone oxytocin, because it's like artificial and it's being injected into you. I feel like because your body is not making it, it's really easy to overdose on something. Because if my body was naturally making the hormone for me to progress in labor, my body would just how God created our bodies, my body would stop before it's overdose. My body would not overdose itself on hormones. Basically, is what I believe. But this nurse, because she told me, oh, we're not gonna like bump it up a lot. Obviously, it's going to intensify your contractions. Yes, it's gonna make them more painful, but obviously we're not gonna like up it up at once. We're going to do it progressively and a little bit at a time each time. I want to disclaim right here that the team that attended to me was all white. Don't put it right there. And I know some people are like, oh, here we go again with the race, but it does contribute to how I felt, the dismissal that happened with me, and how my pain levels were not taken seriously. I do strongly believe that plays a part in it. Unfortunately, I don't want to have to think about that, but unfortunately that's the reality we live in. Racism is real. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat things. So racism is pretty real in healthcare as well, which is why my husband and I made it a point when we were getting ready for labor, all the months coming up to labor and delivery, we made it a point to educate ourselves. My husband needed to educate himself as much as I needed to educate myself, so that if I'm out of it, he sticks to our plan, he sticks to our rights. We don't get, run over or get our rights taken away from us, and we would know our rights. So anyway, the entire team, I just wanted to put that out there. There was not a single black person except for the anesthesia nurse. Anyway, so this nurse starts bumping up the dosage like right from jump, and the pain level goes from 0 to 500. And I was like, okay, all right, we can get through this. Mind you, I have very little tolerance, and I'm fighting so hard to tolerate this pain, until she tells me that, oh, I think they had only done 0.2 something of the dosage, and they needed to probably get to something like 10. I don't know the specifics, but I'm trying to let you understand just how much more upping of the dosage was to happen. So I'm like, okay, if I'm feeling this way at 0.2, and you're talking about needing to bump it up all the way to 8 or whatever number it was up there, I'm barely making it at the level 1 before, like
Epidural.
I said, no, I can't do this. I looked at my husband, and he was not, because we wanted the birth plan was to be natural for the sake of mom and for the sake of baby.
She tried.
We really didn't want any type of intervention. We wanted to try to be natural.
She really tried. I
looked at him, I said, listen, I know that we talked about this, and I know that ideally you would want me to just soldier on, but I can't. If this is, I need an epidural now, because if she's talking about bumping it up like 500% more, I can't do it. I can barely make it where I'm at. By the time I decided we needed to get epidural, she had already bumped it up a little more, and I was in pain that was, I've never felt that much pain before, even with my first one. But with my first one, I had already gotten epidural, I believe, by the time the pain got to the level that I was feeling with the Pitocin. And so I was crying. I was shaking so bad in pain. And so by the time the epidural came in, the anesthesia nurse came in, I was crying, and I had to have a nurse come and comfort me. An older nurse who was taking over while the other nurse went for a lunch break. She was being very understanding, and she held my hand and started calming me because I was hysterical because I was in pain. You know when they get you ready to give you the epidural and you can't look back and you have to hold still? I couldn't, because every time I was thinking, okay, it's gonna come, like, and my contractions were coming so fast. You were seeing that on the screen, right?
Yeah.
They were coming so fast. So as soon as the other one is done, I barely had like 2 minutes before the next one came. So I was like, okay, I'm having a contraction. They won't put it in you if you're having a contraction because you're supposed to stay completely still. The risk of epidurals, I don't even want to get into it. This was the reason why I didn't even want an epidural. Because you make a silly mistake, they inject in the wrong place, you're paralyzed for life. Like, that's it. You know, there's so many complications that could come, and they make you sign this paper with the list long of all these risks of an epidural. It's scary. It's so scary in the moment, and especially because it's not part of your plan and you didn't want to do it. Like, it was the most frustrating thing. It was so painful for me. I ended up crying and being held as they tried to put it in, and I kept feeling like the contraction was going to come while they're putting this in, and I was filled with so much fear because I knew the risks of epidural. And say they're trying to put it in and she's not moving fast enough. A contraction is going to come and I know I won't be able to keep still, and then I'm going to suffer complications. Literally the worst fears, the worst thoughts in my mind were just racing in the middle of this chaos. Everyone was in the room moving around doing this, and in my mind I'm going crazy. Bobby was just...
Meanwhile, I was on the side trying to compose myself, trying to stay calm for her and praying at the same time. Because at that point in time, you have no control. You have no control of anything. You just got put in God's hand at that point. There's nothing I can do. It hurt me to see her in that position, and at the same time I also admire her for even being so strong and pushing through it. But the best thing I can do right at that point was just to pray.
He was just standing in the side. Obviously he couldn't come and watch what was being done. He wasn't like near me, but they also don't allow you to see what they're doing in the back. So when I got the epidural, it did take a few minutes before it kicked in. The nurses kept saying, well, it should be kicking in now. I'm like, no, it's not working. I'm still feeling the pain. And then eventually, probably after like 15, they say it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to kick in or something, or even less. But I didn't feel it kicking all the way until probably 45 minutes to an hour. So I was still there, like shaking with these contractions, and then eventually it kicked in. She also gave me, I think it's a new thing they do for liability purposes, where they give you a manual like pump, where if you feel like the epidural is wearing out, you can pump a dose or two in for yourself. I guess it has things with liability or whatever. I've not gone through that with Jaden, so I think this was really new. So the nurse told me, yes, if you feel like it's wearing out, you pump it again. And also I was feeling like
Very strong pain meds.
the feeling was I would feel pain coming back, because you're supposed to feel numb from your waist going down once you have the epidural. But because of the position I was in, I was trying to progress my labor. They wanted me on the side and doing this and that. So if I laid on one side for too long, the epidural would drain. She said that it works with gravity, so it would drain away from one side to the other side. So I would have to constantly be shifting and not stay in one position for too long.
So you can imagine trying to call the nurses each time to help shift her.
Shift me, yeah.
So I had to take on the job.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't want the attitude.
The nurse that came twice, her shift rolled over twice because I was in labor for that long. Maybe she was having a hard time in her life. I don't know, but I definitely didn't feel taken care of. Like, I felt like she was being bothered. She was giving some attitude, so that's why he didn't want to have to bother calling anyone, and ended up taking it upon himself to move me each time. I managed to get some sleep though because of the epidural. Then within a few hours I progressed all the way, except baby was not moving down. Josiah, I guess, wasn't ready to be born. Mind you, Sunday was his actual due date, so I was thinking the boy's coming on his due date, but he didn't come on his due date. And so he was still station -1. He was in station -1 for a long time. In order for them to tell you to stop pushing, I believe you have to be at 0 or +1, I think, station wise, or even further down. You have to be in the positive station. Yes, my bad. Don't quote me on this. I'm not, a doctor or anything, but I think it was in a positive station in order for you to stop pushing if you don't want to be pushing for too long. And then they also told me that although I was completely effaced and 10 centimeters dilated, there was like a lip of my cervix that was still on the baby's head. So it was in the way of the baby coming down. And then prior to that, before I got the Pitocin, I remember crying because I had been told that my body had stopped laboring. That's why I had been stagnant and was not progressing. And if you remember, I had stopped feeling contractions.
Yes.
And I told my husband, I was like, I don't know if the Lord answered my prayer to take away pain, because I'm not feeling pain. Like I could see a contraction, but I could not feel pain. And that's when they recommended the Pitocin and say your body has stopped laboring.
Yeah, just
I said,
a whole nother obstacle.
oh my goodness, like, are you kidding me? This was out of nowhere. It made 0 sense. 0 sense. I was on the phone with my mom, like crying. Like, can you believe, on top of being in labor for like 2-3 days, being sent home, being in pain, like I'm talking about, my body was consistently contracting and I was in pain for 2 days straight at home before I even came to the hospital, where I continued to be in pain. And then on top of that, at some point my body just decides, all right, we're not laboring anymore. Fast forward, now they've done the Pitocin, I've had the epidural, my whole birth plan has gone out of whack. And now I'm being told that even though my body is ready, the baby is not coming down, and there's a lip in its passageway of my cervix. So all of these things were just adding to my worry, my fears, and I was just getting more and more upset. The treatment of the staff I got wasn't making it any better. Some, they were like cordial, just doing their job, but you can tell the difference between someone who's just doing their job bare minimum, someone who is negative about their job, and then someone who is going above and beyond on their job. So I had that wide spectrum of personalities in the team because they were rotating every 12 hours. I had some people who were being cordial, doing their job and just staying average. Then I had one particular nurse who was completely negative and had an attitude.
What I will say that there were some nurses that had good and bad to them.
Like I said, yes, it wasn't everyone who had a bad attitude, but there was definitely not like above and beyond treatment all the way through. That's adding to my frustration, me being upset at the fact that things are not going according to plan, and I'm hitting a wall every time I think, okay, fine, there's this obstacle, okay, this is how we're gonna go around it, okay, things are gonna be okay now, and then we move forward, bang, another obstacle. We keep hitting walls, and it's like, it's bad enough that we've detoured from my birth plan altogether, and now in addition to that, I'm facing complications. After she told me that, there was still a lip of cervix somehow in the way of the baby, and my baby's head was still, basically my baby's head was floating, wasn't stationed where it needed to be, and it just wasn't ideal. Fast forward to Sunday night, another new midwife and new nurse come in, and this midwife is the original midwife who sent us home, who wasn't all the way supportive of my VBAC plan. Basically made me feel stupid for even wanting to have a VBAC. That's how I felt at the time. I mean, I wasn't communicating this with him obviously because there were people in the room a lot of the times, but at that point I was just feeling like, wow, maybe it was really stupid of me to think that I could make it through, I could have a successful VBAC. I should have just stuck to having a repeat C-section. When in reality, I could have had a VBAC. I was a great candidate. I didn't have gestational diabetes or anything that could have caused my doctors to be concerned and say I need to have a repeat C-section. Let's rewind again to the reason why I wanted a VBAC. I forgot to add this. When I had my son, I had to have they called it an elected cesarean. But for as old as my son is, for that many years, until I went back for prenatal care for this second child I was carrying, I didn't actually know the real reason I was wheeled into surgery for a C-section years ago. Nobody had explained anything. I had this baby alone for the most part, with the exception of strangers that had taken me in. So I had nobody really representing me in a way that I understood. I felt like nothing was explained to me. And I was just told that, oh, you need to go into C-section, you need to sign papers. And I was crying. But you know, that was my own traumatic experience in its own way, and that would be for another day. But just know that until I was halfway through my pregnancy with my second child, I didn't even know the real reason why I had a C-section many years ago with my first in the first place. So only then did they tell me that things like, oh, you know, we just felt like you wouldn't push. And even when I saw the doctor who reviewed those notes from the first C-section, told me that honestly in today's world, we would have allowed you to continue to labor. I had dilated up to 9 centimeters and was completely phased, but they decided that I should have a C-section. That was with the first baby, with Jaden. It was really uncalled for. There was really no reason for me to have a C-section with the first baby. That's another reason why I felt like they won't treat me the way they treated me last time, because I'm older, I'm more mature, I'm more educated, I'm being intentional to educate myself as a black woman. I was also dismissed very much worse actually in the first time I was pregnant with my first baby, especially because I was much younger and I was new in this system, and I also didn't have anybody. They knew I didn't have anyone around. So I suppose they took advantage of that fact. And you know, if you do your research, you know that performing cesarean means you get paid more, and there's a lot of mess going on in the healthcare industry when it comes to black women in particular. Anyway, coming back to me feeling frustrated, feeling completely upset at this point, I'm very demotivated, trying to keep faith and believe that God is in control. The new midwife, the one who wasn't very supportive, first of all dismissed my pain and basically told me to stop continuing to pump epidural. I said, well, the reason I even got the epidural in the first place is because I'm in pain. What do you mean I should stop pumping it? You're disregarding the fact that I'm out. I literally said, but I'm in pain. Yeah, well, if you keep doing that, it's going to be hard for us to know when you're having a contraction. I said, I can feel when I'm having a contraction. You don't even need to guess that. I will tell you I'm having a contraction. It was very consistent every time they would see it on the screen, which didn't make sense. They had a screen to see when I was having a contraction. Now, what do you mean you're not going to know when I'm having contraction? The screen is recording it. That's why you have a screen. Oh my gosh, you just dismissed my concern. To show that it was very dismissive and very unfavorable, when that midwife stepped out of the room, the nurses around and the staff, they were like, just keep pumping, basically. So because they knew the pain I was in, and this midwife was dismissing my pain. So that was starting to make me really upset. To add insult to injury, the person decided to leave me in the hands of a trainee. They had a trainee shadowing them, and they decided, well, I'm gonna be in the office. I literally could hear this midwife whispering, at least they thought they were whispering to the trainee that you're gonna be okay, all right? I'm going to go to the office, you can handle this. Like, how unprofessional is that? Leaving me in the hands of a trainee who is legally not yet qualified to deliver me, but because I guess I was not your cup of tea. I don't know what it was. In retrospect, and I share this with my husband, in retrospect, I am grateful that he did that, because that meant that I got to experience this trainee's very empathetic nature. Out of all the people who were on the team, that was the most empathetic, very sweet, very kind, very understanding person that handled me through my labor and delivery. She tried her very best to accommodate my every request, my every need, even making suggestions to help me feel better and feel more comfortable during labor. I ended up having to push. She said that, you know, let's just start you pushing, even though the baby is still in a negative station. It just means that you'll push longer, but you've had your water broken for so long, we are afraid that you're going to start having an infection. So I said, okay, let's go ahead and push. I pushed, did all kinds of positions, and you know, I was more embarrassed really than anything at this point, because I was now more comfortable, because this other midwife had left the room, was so negative. So this is a baby Josiah Yalasei Kunzwa Kwashe Stubblefield, the latest and newest addition to the Stubblefield family. Yeah, you're the youngest Stubblefield. Yes, you are. It's actually bedtime for him. We're gonna be quick, yeah. This is our baby. This is our newest bundle of joy. Of course, we already have one bundle of joy, the older brother. Isn't that right, Bubba?
He's grabbing everything he can see.
Up close here.
What's the mess about? I just want to sleep. Oh. It's warning.
This is baby Josiah. Say hi. Oh, say hi to the camera. Say hi to the camera. Say hi. Daddy.
Made his debut.
Yeah, he made his debut. This is his appearance. He has to go.
Droolless.
Get ready for bed.
He managed not to drool. Oh, he managed not to drool.
Yes.